present with his attorneys and the people that are present as well. We are outside the presence of the jury. Ms. Hicks, did you have sufficient time to review the records that you're anticipating the people will attempt to introduce through the next witness?
I am prepared, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's bring the jury in, please. And Mr. Edson, consistent with my order on these documents, you're only intending to introduce the ones that are relevant to this case, correct?
Yes, Your Honor. The time period that we have, that we intend to introduce is January of 2011 through, it would be September 2012. That's the last activity for the account is September 2012. We believe that covers not just the time period that Mr. Holmes was in Colorado, but just a couple months short of that, which is consistent with what the court has been talking about as far as the relevant time period.
Okay. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that the jury is back in the courtroom. Mr. Edson, you may call your next witness.
People call Deborah Foley.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could I have you raise your right hand so that I can administer an oath? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please be seated. Could you please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names?
Deborah Lynne Foley, DeborahLynnFoley.
Mr. Edson, you may proceed.
How are you employed?
I am employed by Point Loma Credit Union as a Vice President of Retail Operations.
Are you a custodian of records for Point Loma Credit Union?
Yes, I am.
At some point since July 20th of 2012, did you provide financial documents to related to an account with a member by the name of James Holmes?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach with People's Exhibit 795?
Yes.
I've handed you what's been previously marked as People's Exhibit 795. Do you recognize those documents?
Yes, I do.
What are those documents?
These are the documents that we provided upon the subpoena.
And did you actually review those documents yourself and certify that they're accurate documents?
Yes, I did.
Do these particular documents associate with a particular member's account?
Yes, they do.
Who is that member?
James Holmes.
Are these records computer generated?
Yes,
Are they kept and maintained by Point Loma Credit Union?
yes,
Are you an individual who has access to and knows the foundational information related to these types of records?
yes,
Are the computer entries for these records made in the regular course of Point Loma's business?
yes, they are.
Were those participating in making the records acting in the routine course of business?
Yes,
The input procedures, are they accurate?
yes,
Were the entries made within a reasonable time after the transactions were involved?
yes,
Is the information transmitted by a reliable person like yourself who has knowledge of the events reported?
yes,
Does Point Loma regularly receive, maintain, and rely on information transmitted by the merchants that make up aspects of these records
yes,
and as part of the creation of these records?
yes,
Is that in the normal course of business?
yes, it is.
I'm going to direct your attention to the very first page of that document, and that is for the record bait stamp 49277. Do you see that first page?
Yes, I do.
In general, what is that first page?
This is our membership application. This is where they sign and put all their personal information to become a member of the Point Loma Credit Union.
Are there times that other folks besides the actual member themselves may provide information surrounding opening an account?
Yes,
Would those be called joint owners?
joint owners.
Specific to that particular page, is the information provided by the member and the joint owners used as part of a business relationship between Point Loma and its members and the joint owners?
Yes, that is.
Does Point Loma substantially rely upon the information contained in these records for a business purpose?
Yes, we do.
Is that also, does Point Loma substantially rely upon the information in that first page, the opening document page, if you will, for a business purpose?
Yes.
Explain that business purpose, please.
The business purpose is to create the relationship and use the signatories on this account as those that are authorized to sign.
Beyond just the first page, actually, on that first page, was there a date for opening the account?
8/10/2000.
Objection, Your Honor. This document has not been introduced into evidence. I would object to her testifying to any information on it.
Sustained.
Judge, I'm laying foundation for these documents.
Sustained.
Beyond the opening document page, is there a date range associated with this particular set of records?
Yes.
What is that date range?
Objection again, Your Honor, with regard to testifying to information in a document that has not been introduced into evidence.
Sustained.
Your Honor, I'd move for admission of People's Exhibit 795 pursuant to People v. Marciano, People v. Glover, Glover, and Colorado Rule of Evidence 803, subsection 6.
Is there any objection?
Yes, there is, Your Honor. Would you like me to approach?
Yes? members of the jury, as it turns out, there are things that I need to talk to the lawyers about, and this might be too lengthy to make it into a bench conference, and so I'm going to send you out again. I apologize for that. I wish I had notice. I did not. So I'm going to send you out. Please make sure you follow all my advisements during the break. They all apply. We'll come get you when we're ready. Let's plan on 10 or 15 minutes, and hope that I'm right in my estimate, okay? Thank you. And Ms. Foley, why don't we have you step out of the courtroom as well, please? Yeah, thank you. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that the jury has exited the courtroom. All right, we'll take Ms. Hicks's objections one by one, Mr. Edson, and I'll look at the notes and see if you have a position on each of the many requests. First, do you have a position on the objection to the defendant's Social Security number being published to the jury or the public?
I have no objection to redact that. That's fine, Judge.
Okay. She said she also really objects to her client's parents' dates of birth and Social Security numbers. Any objection to redacting that information?
No, Judge, and I'd agree to go a step further and redact like their home phone number and work phone number. They're not parties to this case. I think the fact that they are joint owners is relevant, but I understand the concern relating to Social Security number, and I would agree to the phone numbers as well. And dates of birth.
Okay. I'm not going to comment on the statement about whether there has been an issue with illegally disclosing any information in the past. Next, I show an objection to those same pieces of information under Rules 401, 402, and 403. That objection is denied as moot because Mr. Edson has agreed to redact the records. The next objection is as to hearsay, again with respect to information provided by the defendant's parents. That objection is denied as moot based on Mr. Edson's agreement to redact that information.
And Judge, just so we're clear, I'm intending on leaving their names on there, but not the information.
Okay. And so, Ms. Hicks, are you objecting to the names of the defendant's parents?
Your Honor, I'm objecting to all information provided on that first page from anyone other than our client.
Mr. Edson, do you know whether that was provided by the defendant in terms of the parents' information, or do you know whether someone else provided that information?
I don't know, Judge. I'm not sure if Ms. Foley would either. I would say that this is covered under the Glover decision, Judge, related to the outside parties having a business relationship with the company at issue, in this case being the Point Loma Credit Union. That was one of the specific questions that I asked this witness for foundation.
That's true. You did ask about not only membership, but also joint owners. And are the parents showing as joint owners?
Yes, sir.
All right. The objection is overruled on
Actually,
the ground. I'm sorry. I think I heard you. So I think now it's my turn. The objection is overruled under People versus Glover and under the business records exception 8036. That's the objection as to hearsay in terms of the parents' names appearing on the first page. Let's see, the next item that I show in terms of an objection is check number 168. And apparently there's a note in the memorandum section of the check that refers to a background check. Mr. Edson, what's your position on that?
I have no objection to marking out that particular language of background check fee. That's fine, Your Honor.
All right, and so that objection under Rules 401, 402, and 403 is denied as moot because Mr. Edson is agreeing to redact that information. Let's see, next I have page 9677, and I don't have the documents in front of me, but you do, Mr. Edson. Ms. Higgs indicated that there is a withdrawal which she believes relates to the purchase that the court excluded yesterday under Rule 403 from Gander Mountain. And so there's a similar objection to that information under Rules 401, 402, and 403. Mr. Edson, what's your position on that?
Judge, I do object to that request. I will read what it says for the court, and I can show the court a copy if the court would like. The date is July 1st. It says withdrawal POS, which would say point of sale. It's got a specific number there, POS GM 420, which is Gander Mountain, although this witness would not necessarily know it's Gander Mountain, but it does have the address of 14000 East Jewel Avenue, Aurora, Colorado, a withdrawal of $233.23. My position is, Judge, although the court excluded information related to this particular sale from the Gander Mountain witnesses yesterday, that was to the purchases themselves, and this information still shows up in his financial credit information. The court did not exclude anything related in its entirety to this transaction. The court excluded information related to the purchases, the specific purchases related to that sale, and the relevancy surrounding the foundation, I should say, surrounding the witness's testimony pertaining to that sale. It did not have anything to do with that specific transaction. I would note, Judge, there are numerous sales. These are official, which we believe are admissible financial documents that pertain to all financial transactions, at least related to Point Loma Credit Union, that the defendant had in the relevant time period, this one specifically in the month of July. So we would object to that request.
Ms. Hicks, anything else from you on this particular item?
Your Honor, I believe I made my position clear, but in case I didn't, I would incorporate all the objections that I made with regard to this testimony regarding this sale at the bench yesterday through the Gander Mountain employees. I think they apply with the same force and effect.
I agree with Mr. Edson. I think this is different. I was concerned yesterday about the jury hearing about the purchase of, I think it was an AR mount, and what were the other two items? Some types of caps.
Snap caps, I believe?
Snap caps. And actually, after the fact, Mr. Edson was able to indicate that the snap caps are consistent with the weapons that were found at the theater. And so there is some connection between the snap caps, at least, and those weapons. Mr. Edson unfortunately made that record until after I had ruled, and I at that point had already ruled, and I told him that. But here, you don't have any mention of the actual items purchased. It's just a withdrawal. There is no mention even of the ATM card number related directly to that sale, as Ms. Higgs acknowledged at the bench. And so I don't have the concerns under Rule 403 that I may have had yesterday. With respect to the AR mount, Mr. Edson could not tell me or provide any information to me that would connect that to this shooting. And so I was concerned about that, about admitting information related to the purchase of an AR mount that apparently had no connection to the case. at least based on the record that was made at the bench. So, but here it doesn't list the items. It's simply listing a withdrawal, and it's listing the name of the store. So the objection is overruled. Next, I have, and by the way, I find that the probative value of the evidence is not substantially outweighed by any of the concerns listed in Rule 403. And I incorporate by reference the record that I made last week in terms of Exhibit P-TR-1227. And we'll get to more of the probative value of the records in a moment in general. But so I'm going to address that more directly here in a moment. Next, we have the previous motion that was filed with respect to these records was a pretrial motion to suppress, and it was not a relevance or a Rule 403 motion, and so I did not make a Rule 401 or Rule 403 ruling with respect to that, but I'm going to double check that just to be sure. Do you remember which order it was, folks?
D122A.
Second. Right, I have confirmed that that motion dealt with a Fourth Amendment type of request to suppress and not with a request to suppress based on the rules of evidence. So let me then move on to the next objection. There is a general objection under Rules 401, 402, and 403 with respect to these documents. And the argument is that there's little information in the documents that talks about specific purchases to the extent specific purchases of items used in the shooting or related to the shooting. And the further argument is that to the extent that there is such information, that it is cumulative to evidence that has already been introduced. There's also a concern that was expressed by Ms. Higgs that some of the information in the records is unclear because it's a lot of abbreviations or sort of abbreviations for things that are, or places, or things that were purchased, so it can be misleading to the jury and confusing under Rule 403. And then there's a general hearsay objection to all of the information that's in the records. All right, the hearsay objection is overruled based on the business records exception and based on People versus Glover and People versus Marciano. Mr. Edson, would you like to address the Rules 401, 402, and 403 general objections to all these documents?
Thank you, Your Honor. We believe that the probative value is not substantially outweighed by the danger of any unfair prejudice, any cumulative nature of any evidence, which we do not believe it is, and it is not going to be misleading to the jury. I'll take those in order. Just in general, we would note, Judge, that the records, as I made mention to you before the jury came back in, cover a time period of January 2011 through September 2012. The reason those date ranges were chosen was, as the court knows, Mr. Holmes started his graduate work in the spring of 2011. We believe it's necessary to show a little bit of context for the jury, how he generally month to month had financial transactions through this Point Loma account in a couple of months leading up to the time that he becomes a grad student at the University of Colorado. It then encompasses the entirety of the time that he was a grad student at the University of Colorado. And then we did not stop for these documents in July of 2012 because there was actually another payment that was made out of this account in September of 2012 that went towards the USAA credit card, which was the court's heard testimony about, and we'll have additional witnesses related to that. But the court has heard testimony that some other items used in this particular crime were purchased through. So that's why we have those date ranges. We would note that this account had been open since 2000. We are not going back that far. We're going to that specific time period. So for those reasons, that particular aspect of these records are relevant. It's, again, it's an insanity case. It's relevant to show Mr. Holmes, and quite frankly, Judge, there's quite a change in the amount and types of purchases. If the court and the jury looks at these records over that time span, they will see they're generally month to month somewhat similar until we reach roughly the May time period, and then there's a lot more activity in these records. And I think it's important to show that so it's not just in a vacuum of just a May to a July time period. That aspect's important. Therefore, all of that's relevant. It is not cumulative, even if there was, and there was, testimony for some other purchases that went through the Point Loma account. And most specifically, testimony will show that the USAA credit card was paid out of the Point Loma account on numerous occasions, and there was some cash withdrawals. We've heard testimony about Mr. Holmes having cash on him. We know that there was cash in the notebook. That testimony's come out as well. All this information is not cumulative to the aspect that, and the court actually references this in page 39 of D122A, noticing that there was an inordinate amount of weapons and ammunition seized, and it's not unusual to find these types of items to show actually how they were purchased and how there were funds available to purchase many of these items. So it's not just the purchase of the items themselves, but it's these records show how there was available capital to actually make these transactions, not be overdrawn in any sort of account, how they were methodically paid off as far as the credit card goes. So it is not cumulative in any respect. Again, Judge, these records do not lay out the exact purchases themselves. The items purchased, I should say. They show exactly where the amount or the withdrawal amount would be, the date, and the actual company as well. Finally, to the misleading the jury argument, I would note these are statements of accounts that are sent to Point Loma members, the general public. So there's nothing on here that wouldn't be sent out to any other member of the public, so it's not going to be misleading to the jury. I think many of them are self-explanatory, particularly the companies themselves such as a King Soopers, as a 7-Eleven, as a PayPal is in here, USAA account. So it's not going to be misleading to the jury. And I think I've covered all, but I'll defer to the court.
Have I allowed any records so far in the trial that go back to January? What's the earliest records that have been allowed so far?
My recollection would be May, as far as purchases. If I could have a moment, Judge.
Yes. And also, what's the relevance of the payment in September of 2012? You said that there was a payment made. At that point, the defendant's already in custody. So I don't know who made the payment, but what's the relevance of that payment?
We'll take those in order, Judge. First of all, my recollection is the first actual purchase that was related to the incident in the theater would have been May of 2012. Though we would note, Judge, that within these records and within this trial, the court has heard testimony of the defendant coming out to Colorado in the interview process beforehand, and some of that information, such as payments for flights and things of that nature, are in these records as well. So it doesn't begin and end with May. It does go back a bit further. I think that would be, I need to look, but that would be in a February, March, April time period of 2012. Again, that early spring time period. Going to the September date, I will read this to the court. This is on page 49684. On September 5th, there was a withdrawal, which these records indicate is a payment to USAA credit card in the amount of $1,891.02. I would note, Judge, that the USAA records show that the USAA credit card account was generally paid off in a fairly regular time fashion, even sometimes ahead of payment schedule. This particular balance was balance that had been rung up on the USAA MasterCard, but had not been paid off prior to the criminal activity. So it was outstanding debt essentially on the USAA account. This witness would not be able to identify who made that payment, but can authenticate through these records that a payment was in fact made out of this account that paid off the credit card that was used to purchase additional items related to the crime.
Is that the only entry after July 20, 2012?
There's a dividend interest on July 31st, but actual payment withdrawal, that is the last.
All right, anything else, Ms. Higgs?
I will also note to the court, since the court doesn't have the luxury of having the exhibit in front of you, there's also a statement from, looks like August 1st through August 31st, which would post-date the crime, as well as the statement from September 1st to September 30th of 2012.
All right, thank you.
Well, Judge, if I may, the September 1st through September 30th is the actual September date that has that last transaction. The August statement, which would be August 1st through August 31st, has no activity aside from interest, accrued interest, but it's the month in between the last July statement and that September statement. It completes the transaction record. And Judge, I have a copy of this if the court would like.
Yes, please, let me see it. Thank you. All right, the general objection is to relevance and also under Rule 403. So let me address first the relevance of these documents. First of all, although Order D-122A dealt with a Fourth Amendment type issue, there were some statements in there and there was some discussion in there that had to do with the probative value of the records because there was a discussion about probable cause. So I realized that it was in a different context, but to the extent that there's any discussion in those records relevant to or that goes to the probative value of these records or the relevance of these records, I incorporate that by reference into my ruling today. I agree with Mr. Edson that for the most part, these documents are relevant. They're relevant in general for one of two things. Either one, to show some of the purchases that were made of items used, either allegedly used either in the shooting or allegedly used in the apartment. That's number one. And number two, they are generally relevant because they're probative of the issues raised by the not guilty by reason of insanity plea, and because they also go to the culpable mental state elements of the charged crimes. So those are the two general areas of relevance. In terms of the items purchased, it hardly requires any discussion. Of course, they're relevant if they show payment or purchases of items in this case. There may be some overlap with other evidence, but I find that the probative value of that information is not substantially outweighed by the unnecessary presentation of cumulative evidence. And so it is not inadmissible under Rule 403. It is admissible under Rule 403. Any items that were either found at the theater scene or at the scene in the defendant's apartment, or frankly, even in the defendant's car, that can be connected to these records in terms of payments made or withdrawals made to make those purchases, that information has relevance, there's a lot of relevance in this trial. Then we get to the issues raised by the not guilty by reason of insanity plea. And I've talked a lot about this, and so this is similar to what I have been saying throughout and the extensive record I made last week on the People's Exhibit P-TR-1227. It goes to the defendant's cognitive abilities. It goes to the defendant's mental capacity, to his mental capacity to distinguish right from wrong, to his mental capacity mental states required by the offenses charged. It goes to his ability to function in the world, if you will, his ability to manage his financial affairs, his ability to keep on top of issues with his banks, any issue, and so it has some probative value. In terms of any of the concerns in Rule 403, I don't see a lot of concerns. The concerns that were raised by Ms. Higgs are that it's cumulative, and again, there is some overlap, but I don't find that this is the unnecessary presentation of cumulative evidence to the point that it substantially outweighs the probative value of the evidence, nor am I concerned about the potential for confusing the jury or misleading the jury. These are bank records, as Mr. Edson pointed out, bank records that are sent to the owner of the account, and so he's a member of the public. They are sent to the defendant as the owner of the account or as the member in the account, and they are sent to him as a member of the public. To the extent that there is anything in here that defense counsel is concerned will be confusing to the jury or misleading to the jury, then she'll have an opportunity in cross-examination to clarify that, to ask the witness questions about that so that there's no confusion, so that the jury is not misled. But I haven't heard any specifics in terms of what about these records will be confusing or misleading, and certainly not to the point that such concerns would substantially outweigh the probative value of the evidence. In terms of the range of dates, I'm going to limit them as follows. I'm going to limit them to start from May of 2011 and then to July of 2012, with one exception. I will allow the last statement, the last 2 pages, which shows the payment made in September of 2012. But I don't think there's anything that's relevant between July 20 of 2012 and September 20 of 2012, other than the last 2 pages. And the last 2 pages show the withdrawal payment to USAA credit card. The page before that just shows deposit dividend information. The page before that appears to show the same type of information. The page before that is a check that's dated June 29, 2012 for rent. That I'm going to allow. And the page before that is, the 2 pages before that are fair game as well, because it includes the time frame of July 1 to July 31. So there are some transactions or some withdrawals and a couple of withdrawals in a deposit on those 2 pages. So even though the date, the range of date for that statement goes beyond July 20, there's really nothing on here beyond July 20. This goes all the way to July 31 just because that's the way banks usually do statements. So, and in terms of the beginning of the time frame, as I said, I'll allow from May of 2011 to the end, to what I just said in 2012. I understand what Mr. Edson is saying in terms of there may be proof here about payment for the defendant's trip to Colorado in February, I think it was, when he interviewed, but that nobody's really disputing that. That's not really an issue in the case. And so just because there may be a payment of something here, I don't think makes it particularly probative, and in my view, not enough to be admitted under the rules of evidence, either Rules 401 or either Rules 401 or 403. Rules 401, 402, or 403. I think I've been consistent with about the spring of 2012 in terms of allowing information, and I do think that to the extent Mr. Edson is arguing that the jury needs to be able to compare what the defendant was doing during the time when he allegedly was planning the shooting and before then, I think allowing from May on gives the prosecution that and then some. That's the time frame when the defendant was planning to come to Colorado, planning to start school. I think he started attending school early in June, I believe it was, of 2011. And so, and nobody's arguing, at least I haven't heard anybody argue that. Well, I'll limit it to the prosecution. Certainly, I haven't heard the prosecution argue that the defendant was suffering from a mental illness in May and June of 2011, and that, or even July or August or September or the rest of 2011. Their position has been that the defendant was not suffering from a mental illness in that period of time, and to the extent that there was a mental illness, that there wasn't that much change, that the defendant remained the same throughout. And so allowing from May of 2011 on gives the prosecution the ability to compare the before the planning period and the after the planning period, if you will. So I don't think they need to go back all the way to January of 2011. Let me see if there was anything in my notes that I forgot to mention. Give me just a second. Mr. Edson mentioned that there are some indications of cash withdrawal here. There was some cash found in, I think, in the package that was sent by Mr. Holmes to Dr. Fenton. So there is that additional relevance there as well. All right, is there anything else from the people at this time with respect to these records, Mr. Edson?
No, Judge, I just would comment briefly, because there's numerous redactions that I need to make. I think it makes the most sense, with the court's permission, is we'll recall Ms. Foley. I'm going to ask her some additional questions, and then I'd ask her, for leave for her to come off the stand. We put another witness on, and then I recall her once we have the redactions made and proper, because I would like to provide individual copies to the jury. But I want to make sure that the redactions are done exactly as the court requested, so we ask for that leave.
Ms. Hicks, is that okay with you? Okay, great. You can come and retrieve the documents. Thank you. All right, are you ready for the next witness then, Mr. Edson?
Yes, we're going to put Ms. Foley on briefly, and then we'll call another witness after that.
Okay, I got
Recall.
you. Let's get the jury then, please. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that the jury is back in the courtroom. Members of the jury, thank you for your patience. I appreciate that. That was about 10 minutes in my book anyway. So, all right, Ms. Foley is back on the stand, and Ms. Foley, I remind you that you're still under oath, okay? Mr. Edson, you may proceed now.
Judge, we did move for admission of People's Exhibit 795.
Yes, you did. And Exhibit 795 has been admitted pursuant to the discussion that we had earlier.
Your Honor, may I approach to grab an item of evidence, please?
You may.
Ma'am, I've shown you, and I've actually placed before you, People's Exhibit 720. Do you recognize that exhibit?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
That is a Point Loma Credit Union Visa check card.
You familiar with those types of check cards?
Yes, I am.
Are they also sometimes called debit cards?
Yes.
Does that particular exhibit, does that associate with a particular member from your credit union?
Yes, it is.
And who is that?
James E. Holmes.
What are the last four digits of that particular debit card?
8522.
Do you still have the paper documents in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. Couple of record-keeping things. The very first page, do you see the bottom right corner of that page, or should be a red number? Do you see that number?
Yes, 49277.
Judge, I have no further questions at this time. I would request permission to recall Ms. Foley later this morning or early afternoon.
All right. Do you want to cross-examine now, or do you want to hold off?
Your Honor, my preference would be to wait and cross-examine her once the direct is complete.
All right, we'll proceed in that fashion. Ms. Foley, if you would step down, please, you're going to be called back again later today, okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Call your next witness, please.
Lynne Fenton, Your Honor.
Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
Could I have you raise your right hand for me so that I can administer an oath? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please be seated. You can hand me those records there. Your way. Mr. Edson, want to approach to retrieve these records? Could you please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names?
Lynne Leslie Fenton, Lynnne Lesley Fenton.
Mr. Brockler, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, would you please tell us what you do for a living?
I'm a psychiatrist. I work at the University of Colorado.
Back between March and June of 2012, did you act as a therapist for the defendant seated here in the glasses and the beard and the mustache and maybe it's a gray-brown shirt?
I did.
Can you tell us how you came to serve as a therapist for him?
At that time, I was the medical director of the Student Mental Health Service at the Anschutz Medical Campus, and Mr. Holmes came seeking treatment to the Student Mental Health Service.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Ma'am, I'm handing you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 1248. Can you take a look at that and tell me if you recognize what's contained in it?
I do.
What is it?
This is copies of my notes and also Margaret Roth's notes, along with some billing statements and some emails.
Let's be specific before we move forward. Are there emails in there between Margaret Roth and you?
Yes.
Are there emails between you and the defendant?
Yes.
Are there emails between you and someone named Dr. Robert Feinstein?
Yes.
Are there also what we'll call notes and reports generated by both Margaret Roth and you?
Yes.
Now, does this fairly and accurately capture the relevant portions of the file for the defendant for the period between March and June of 2012 related to your being his therapist?
It does.
Okay. First thing I want to ask you is, how did he come to be referred to you specifically?
He called our general appointment line for student mental health. Margaret Roth, who is a social worker on our team, saw him, and then she referred him to me.
And when she refers him to you, does she send you an email that's included in 1248?
Yes.
At the time that you first see the defendant, and then we'll go back to the date of it, at the time that you first see him, did you have any more information from Miss Roth than the email? Like, did you also have her notes and a report?
No, I didn't have her notes or a report, just the email.
First, if you would, tell us the date that Miss Roth saw the defendant.
March 16th, 2012.
And tell us, is Miss Roth a psychiatrist?
No, she's a social worker.
Okay, the information that she conveyed to you after her meeting with the defendant on March 16th, what was it?
It was that she thought he was one of the most anxious people she ever had seen, that she thought he had obsessive compulsive disorder, that he had thoughts of killing people, but she didn't think he was imminently dangerous.
Now, did she indicate to you what he initially presented with, what his concern that he brought to her was?
Doesn't look like it says exactly that in her email, but I know that she had told me that he sought treatment for anxiety in social situations.
Okay. So based on that email from her, did you then set up at the first convenience for him and you an appointment?
Well, she told me that he would be contacting me, and that's what he did. He emailed me, and then we set up an appointment.
After that meeting with Miss Roth on Friday the 16th, when did you meet with the defendant first?
The following Wednesday, which was the 21st.
Tell us about that meeting. Where did it take place?
And that was in my office in Building 500, which is on the Anschutz Medical Campus.
Did you make some initial observations about the defendant?
I did.
Tell us about him.
Well, he did indeed seem very nervous. He was very quiet, and that's what I thought initially.
How was he dressed?
Looked like your average grad student, jeans or khakis and a just sort of nondescript T-shirt or button-down.
Now, did you start immediately the conversation by getting to the statements he'd made to Miss Roth about ruminative thoughts of killing people?
No.
Tell me what you did.
No, I talked in more general terms and tried to get a history of what had been going on with him.
Now, this is probably a good time to ask this question, but given the role that you played as this therapist, how much do you rely upon the information that is provided to you by the person that you're treating?
Very much.
Other than the words that they say to you and your observations of them, would you have any other additional information?
In this case, no.
So after you talk with them about some introductory things, some background things, and are you doing that to develop a relationship with him, a therapeutic relationship?
Partially, I'm gathering information, and at the same time, I'm trying to establish a working relationship.
What's his presentation like to you as he's going over this background information?
Well, he remained very quiet. He would give very short answers.
You've had experience, by the way, with other neuroscience grad students.
Yes.
Did he present significantly differently than they did?
I would say no, other than he was very quiet.
At some point, do you begin to have a conversation with him during this session about issues going on in his life?
Yes.
What does he tell you?
He tells me he's having some relationship problems, that his girlfriend had recently broke up with him.
Like 2 weeks before?
2 weeks before.
What else does he say? And ma'am, let me do this. I know you have the exhibit up there and you've
Yes.
told us what it is. If you're going to refer to it to remind you of some specifics, would you tell us that so we can make sure it's on the record? And then if you read it and it reminds you, would you then tell us that it reminds you and turn it over?
Sure.
Okay.
So I'll
Are you doing
Got
that
it.
right now?
yes, I was going to look at that first note.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Exhibit P-TR-1248, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Ms. Brady,
I was going to ask if it's being admitted.
are you moving its submission, Mr. Bruckler?
I was going to at the end, Your Honor, after we'd had her go through it.
All right, is there any objection to admitting it?
If I can take a quick look at it, I don't think I have any objection to
May I
it.
approach the witness?
No objection.
All right. Without objection, P-TR-1248 is admitted.
Could you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, what else did he tell you other than his girlfriend had broke up with him 2 weeks ago? What other relationship issues did he describe to you?
And now that the records have been admitted, I'm assuming there's no objection to her reading from it when she needs to, correct?
Correct.
Not from me.
Okay, so now that it's been admitted, if you need to read something from it, go ahead, just let us know you're doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Let me direct you to some specific things. Did he discuss with you anxiety that he had around people?
Yes.
How did he do that?
I asked him about it because I knew that was what he was coming in for, and he just talked very briefly, succinctly about that.
Did he make any statements to you about the relationships that he has with people or that they have with them, with him? I'm sorry.
Well, yes.
What'd he
So he said, and I am going to read this because I have a quote. I don't have relationships with people, they have relationships with me.
What else did he talk to you about in that first session regarding any thoughts or beliefs that he had?
Well, I asked him a lot about his background, and so he described how when he was 10, he got glasses, and that after that he wanted to overcome biology.
Okay. At some point during the conversation, do you visit the issue of his expressed thoughts about harming or killing others to Miss Roth?
Yes.
Let me ask you this first. Have you had patients before that have, and can we call this homicidal ideation?
Yes,
Have you had patients like that before?
I have.
Now, does that instantly mean in your experience that they're going to go out and commit a crime?
No.
So what do you do to determine how this homicidal ideation may be affecting this person?
Well, I try to understand if they have a plan, if they're taking any steps to carry out any action that is related to these thoughts. And then secondly, if the homicidal ideation is directed at any specific target.
Did you ask him those questions?
I did.
And what did he tell you?
No, to both.
Did he indicate to you sort of a more global thought about what he meant by wanting to kill people?
He did, and I think I've got another quote in here.
And you're reading from 1248, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay.
He said that his OCD symptoms, and that was referring to his thoughts of homicidal ideation, his OCD symptoms were the worst they had been, and the solution to the, quote, biological problem would be to eliminate the problem, homicide. But you can't kill everyone, so it's not an effective solution.
How did that affect you?
How did that affect me?
How did you take that?
Well, for one thing, I really wasn't sure what he meant by the biological problem. But he seemed to be dismissing the idea of homicide as an effective solution.
Well, does that put you on edge more or put you at ease more?
At ease more.
Did you ask him if he had thoughts of hurting himself?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He said no.
Did you ask him if he'd ever hurt himself?
He said, no, I wouldn't hurt myself.
Now, At this point, does it appear to you at all that he is going to act out in any sort of an aggressive or violent way based on anything he's presented to you or told you?
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
There were no signs of that.
Now, nonetheless, at the end of this, do you have conversations with him about medications?
I do.
And does he bring up medications? Do you bring up medications? How does it happen?
I don't remember exactly, but most likely I'm the one who brought it up.
Did he seem open to it?
Yes.
Now, tell us what medications you discussed with the defendant.
Sertraline, Klonopin, also known as clonazepam, and propranolol.
Tell us about each of those, would you? I don't know what they are.
Sertraline is also known as Zoloft. It's a pretty common antidepressant. It's known as an SSRI, which means selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor.
1 second on that. You said it's commonly known as an antidepressant. Did you see any evidence that the defendant was depressed?
No,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
he was a little sad because of the breakup with his girlfriend, but he showed no other signs of depression.
Did he express to you that he was feeling depressed?
No,
So why were you prescribing the sertraline?
because it's also good for anxiety disorders, and it's FDA approved for social anxiety, which I thought he had, as well as obsessive compulsive disorder, which I also thought he had.
Okay. Now, when you are going to prescribe someone for sertraline, do you start them off at a therapeutic dose?
No, I usually start at a low dose to make sure they're going to tolerate it.
Did you do that here?
Yes.
And how, we'll get to the other drugs in a moment, but how do you end up determining whether or not someone is tolerating a low dose of a drug and that they'll tolerate potentially more?
I ask them if they're having any side effects.
You rely upon what they tell you.
Yes.
Let's go to the other ones. You said, was it Klonopin?
Yes, Klonopin, also known as clonazepam, that's a benzodiazepine. It's in that same category as Valium. So it's used to help relieve anxiety.
Similar approach in terms of starting off with a low dose to see if they tolerate it?
A little bit different. The reason that I used a benzo was I knew it was going to take weeks or more for the sertraline to really kick in and help with his anxiety. And he needed something right away for his lab presentations. And the Klonopin would work instantly.
And that brings up a good point. Did he express to you issues related to his anxiety and how it might affect his lab presentations?
Yes.
Okay. What was the third thing you said?
And the third one was,
Yeah, and
actually, I mentioned propranolol, but that actually, I did not prescribe at the first visit. So it was just those two.
Now, did you also consider something called an AP or an antipsychotic?
Yes, that was in the back of my mind.
Based on what?
Based on some of the odd statements that he made, like that he wanted to overcome biology after he got glasses, I couldn't tell if that was just sort of an odd way of expressing himself or if his thinking was rather off. And I suspected he might have a personality disorder. If he did have one of the personality disorders like schizoid or schizotypal, an antipsychotic might help for that.
Now, at this particular time, did you discuss that with him?
No.
All right. Also, during this first meeting with him, does he ever express to you anything about human capital?
No.
They ever talk to you about thinking that he can feel better or increase his self-worth by murdering others?
No.
The appointment ends, and then does he agree to see you again?
He does.
What was your goal in terms of getting him back in? What was sort of the pace you wanted to set to try to treat him?
Well, for one thing, I wanted to check and see how the medications were working. But also, I felt I really didn't understand very much about this homicidal ideation And so I wanted to see him back and try to get more information about that.
Did you find that as you asked him questions that he was open and forthcoming with information on every question?
No.
Guarded?
I thought so. He, for whatever reason, was speaking very little.
So this is on the 21st. What did you set the next appointment for?
So that was March 27th.
And does he agree to come back and see you on March 27th?
Yes.
Is that a good sign?
I thought so.
Okay. Why?
Because he was agreeing to engage in treatment.
I should have asked you one more thing before we move to the 27th, and that is these statements that he makes to you about having these thoughts of killing people. Based on your conversation with him, did it strike you that these were brand new thoughts?
No.
What was the impression you got from the discussion you had with him?
I had the impression they'd been there for quite a while, at least many months.
Okay. Maybe years. You don't
Maybe
know.
years, yes.
On the 27th, does he come back and see you?
He does.
Now, again, on time?
Yes.
Dressed appropriately?
Yes.
Like he did before?
Yes.
Like other grad students?
Yes.
Was his presentation the same as it had been before in terms of how he dealt with you?
Yes.
Now, was this a full-blown session like you'd had before, or was this different?
No, this was a shorter visit, probably 15, 20 minutes to check and see how he was doing with the medications.
And does that involve you asking him questions about how he's feeling?
Yes.
And did he give you information on that?
A little bit.
Well, tell us what he told you.
He said that his OCD symptoms were unchanged. Overall, his anxiety seemed to be about the same. He tried the Klonopin for one of the lab presentations, but he felt like it did not help his anxiety, and furthermore, it made him feel kind of sleepy and hard to remember things. So he didn't want to take that anymore.
What did you do with that information?
So I said, all right, let's stop the Klonopin and let's try another medication called propranolol.
Why?
Because it specifically is good for performance anxiety. It dampens what we call a sympathetic response, which he had complained of specifically, things like your heart racing or sweating or feeling jittery. And for most people, it would not be sedating.
Any other changes that you made?
No.
Now, did he at any point express to you that he was feeling anything that you would or he would describe as mania or manic?
No.
How long was that session on the 27th?
15 or 20 minutes.
Okay. Did he ever bring up anything about human capital or thinking that he could make himself feel better or improve his self-worth by murdering people?
No.
Did you schedule another appointment with him?
Yes, a week later.
Okay, and what was the purpose of that?
So that was another medication check to see this time if the propranolol was working and also check and see if the sertraline was starting to work.
Does he agree to come back for that one?
Yes,
And is that a good sign?
I thought so.
All right, he comes back on, you said April the 3rd,
Yes,
and is he dressed appropriately?
yes,
Consistent with how he'd been before?
yes,
Same with his presentation to you and his affect?
yes.
No significant changes that you could discern?
No,
And is he on time?
he is.
Okay, tell us about that meeting.
So at that meeting, he said that the propranolol did seem to work. He felt less anxious, but he, again, had some problems maybe remembering things. And so I recommended that he try a lower dose from, instead of 10 milligrams twice a day, I recommended 5 milligrams twice a day. He also said that he was really sleeping a lot, like about 9 hours a day, and he still felt very tired during the day. So I thought that could possibly be related to the sertraline.
I'm sorry, could the sertraline have an effect like that on a person?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we moved it to about 6 p.m., hoping that that would just make him less sedated during the day.
How long was that meeting?
Again, probably 15 or 20 minutes.
Does he at this meeting ever express to you anything that, like human capital?
No.
Does he tell you that he thinks he can improve how good he feels or his self-value by murdering people.
No,
Does he tell you that he's feeling any signs of mania or manic?
no, if he mentioned he was sleeping a lot, which is kind of the opposite.
Okay. Did you schedule another appointment after that?
Yes,
When did you schedule that for?
that was for April 17th, 2 weeks later.
What was the purpose of that meeting?
So that, again, was a med recheck, but I wanted to spend some more time with him, see if I could understand some more about his symptoms.
Okay. Does he show up for that appointment?
He does,
On time?
yes,
Is he dressed appropriately?
yes.
You discern no changes in his appearance, hygiene, nothing like that?
He seemed the same.
In terms of his presentation and communication style with you as well?
Pretty much.
Okay, tell us about, did you discuss whether or not he felt depressed or suicidal?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
No, his mood seemed fine and he was not suicidal.
Did you inquire of him about any additional or anything about the homicidal thoughts that he had expressed earlier?
Yes, we talked some more about that.
And what does he tell you?
Again, he doesn't answer very much at all about it, and I'm gonna check my notes here.
Okay, thank you for telling us. Are you looking at 1248, ma'am?
Yes, I'm looking at the note from April 17th.
And that's in the exhibit 1248, just to be clear on the record.
Yes.
Okay, tell us.
So, and your question again was, can you repeat it, please?
What he told you when you pressed him on any homicidal thoughts that he had.
Okay. He said, and I'm going to read from the record here, that he broke up with his girlfriend about a week ago, that he was doing okay, but he had an increase in his obsessive thoughts.
Okay, and did you discuss those with him?
Yes, and he said that specifically the increase was in his obsessive thoughts about women. And then he added further that he had 3 categories of obsessive thoughts. One that had to do with women, one that had to do with men, and one that had to do with everyone.
Okay, and did he go on to give you more detail about that?
No, I tried to get more information, but he would not give more details.
Now, does this become like an ongoing theme throughout all of your meetings with him, that at some point he just stops giving you information?
It was.
Well, let me ask you, why don't you just keep beating on him and asking the same question over and over, or getting more aggressive with him? Why don't you do that?
Well, first of all, most likely wouldn't work, even with my sort of indirect attempts to look at things in a low-pressure way. He wasn't answering, and so most likely, if I asked him head on, tell me, answer this, he would have not answered. Also, I was hoping to have a working alliance with him, so he would keep coming back, so I'd have a chance to understand this better and to help him.
Does he give you any indication on April 17th that he is taking steps to act on these, what you perceive to be long-term thoughts of harming or killing others?
No.
Does he talk to you about philosophical ideas in any way? Purpose of life stuff?
He did.
What did he say?
Well, he didn't talk about it so much, but he angrily was asking me, why won't you tell me what your philosophy of life was? I've told you all my ideas.
Did you know what that meant?
No.
You still believe at this time that he's suffering from some sort of social phobia?
Yes, I thought he had social anxiety disorder.
How would you describe your therapeutic relationship with the defendant at this time?
Tentative.
What does that mean?
Well, although he was coming in for appointments, I was worried that he might drop out of treatment at any time.
And so what did you start to think about doing at this time to address that? And we'll get to May 1st, but did you already start thinking about bringing someone else in or a different approach?
I don't think I was thinking of it just yet.
Okay.
I think it was the next visit.
One of the other things that you assessed was, did you, I'm sorry, on April the 17th when you're meeting with him, did you get any indication or presentation from him that he was any more imminent as a threat or anything like that?
No.
Did you, in your notes, write down notes to yourself to try to rule in or rule out different things as you continued this therapeutic relationship with the defendant?
I did.
Like, was one of them related to psychotic level thinking?
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
So that means thoughts that are not based on reality.
Now, does that mean that in every aspect of his presentation and the things that you knew about him, he seemed disconnected, or were there a few select statements that you wondered about?
Just a few select odd statements that I didn't understand.
Tell us what they were.
Well, one was that he was demanding to know my philosophy of life and that he had told me all of his philosophy of life. And I just couldn't fathom what he meant, and I wondered if perhaps that was some illogical statement.
At the time, was that what you were thinking about when you wrote that down, that psychotic level thinking, question mark?
That, and of course I still did not understand much at all about these homicidal ideations.
Did you then do anything at all with the medications at the time?
Yes.
What did you do?
So at this point, at the last visit, we had increased his sertraline, the Zoloft, from 50 to 100 milligrams. And he was still tolerating it, although he still complained, even though we moved it to bedtime. He was very sleepy during the day.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. Was 100 milligrams, is that a therapeutic dose, or is that on the road to a therapeutic
That,
dose?
for the things I was treating him for, that was on the road to a therapeutic dose.
Okay. Did he ever complain to you during this period of time about any mania or manic symptoms, anything like that?
No.
The opposite again?
He was complaining he was sleeping too much.
Okay. What else?
So our plan was to increase the sertraline to 150 milligrams. And the rest of the plan was for me to try to maintain some sort of alliance with him and keep him coming back to treatment in the hopes that I could learn more about the homicidal ideation.
Did you discuss with him the use of an antipsychotic?
Not at that visit, but it was the visit just prior to this, 4-3.
Oh, forgive me. I
Yes.
must have screwed that up. Can we
That's
just
all
go
right.
back to 4-3
Yes.
real quick?
Yes.
I'm sorry. We're leaving April 17th. We're going to April 3rd. Tell us about your conversation with the defendant about the potential use of an antipsychotic.
So I told him about a medication called Seroquel, also known as quetiapine, that it was an antipsychotic, but it also helped a lot for people with anxiety. And so I proposed that when we were still looking for something that might help right away.
And what was his response to you when you suggested that?
He was worried that it would be too sedating.
So he declined it.
So he declined it, yes, because of that.
By April 17th, and we're back to April 17th, do you have another conversation with him about it or not?
No, I was thinking about it, but we did not talk about it.
Did you set another date for him to come back and meet with you after April 17th?
Yes,
What
2
was
weeks.
it? I'm sorry.
2 weeks later, it was May 1st.
May 1st. And did he agree to come back?
Yes,
Is that a good sign?
I thought so.
Yeah. So in between then, Did something happen regarding a prescription you wrote for the defendant?
It did.
And what was the prescription for?
The prescription was for sertraline.
And what happened with the prescription?
I accidentally wrote the wrong last name
What
on the
name?
prescription.
Sorry, what name did you use?
Holmes, Hughes instead of Holmes.
Okay, and after you had written that prescription, and did you give that to the defendant on his way out?
I did.
At some point after that April 17th appointment, did he reach out to you about that mistake?
Yes, he sent me an email.
And what did the email say?
It said, "An inconvenience, Fenton."
Now, was there something in the subject line that was unusual?
Yes, there was some sort of emoticon that I didn't recognize.
Your Honor, with the court's permission and via the, I'm probably going to mess up Emma here, but with the court's permission, can I publish that through the, Elmo?
Yes.
Top part. Thank you. By the way, is that email part of People's 1248?
It is.
Okay. Can you zoom in on the subject, ma'am? I guess that's it. Okay. Is that symbol that we're talking about there next to subject, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Now look, when you get this email from the defendant, how do you respond?
Well, first of all, I felt terrible. Oh, it's a terrible mistake. So I email him right back. I'm saying, oh, I'm so sorry. I'll call in the correct prescription if you tell me the number of the pharmacy.
Okay. And does he do that?
Yes.
And did you call it in?
Yes.
Now, and by the way, is that email exchange that you had with him also contained in People's 1248?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at some next appointment, you said was May 1st?
Yes.
Did you then have another appointment with the defendant? In this one, did you ask him what that symbol meant?
I did.
And we'll get to the rest of May 1st, but just tell us, what did he describe to you that symbol was?
He said that the cues were fists and that it was him punching me in the eye.
Now, did he give that up right away, or did you have to talk with him a bunch to get there?
He really didn't want to tell me, so it took a good several minutes for me to convince him to tell me what it was.
Thank you, ma'am. Once he tells you that, does he have any follow-on words after that, after he says it's him punching you in the eye?
He seemed like he felt bad. He said something to the effect of, oh, it was dumb. I shouldn't have done it.
Did he say something about violence?
Then he said, violence, is that what you want to, is that what you need to hear?
Was there any other discussion about that?
About the emoticon?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't think so.
I want to get to May 1st now. By the way, was there any, after you cleared up this error of yours on the prescription, did you have any more contact with the defendant prior to May 1st?
No.
Now, he clearly had your email. Do we have the emails that he emailed to you throughout the period of your time as his therapist?
We do.
Did you also provide him a phone number, not your personal cell, but a phone number to try to reach you?
Yes, my office number.
Okay. And do you know what the last four of that office number was?
It's different than the one I have now. I think it was 4716.
That might be in one of the emails too.
Probably is.
Okay. On May 1st, does he come to the appointment
Yes.
on time,
Yes.
dressed like he always is,
Yes.
affect and presentation same as it always is?
Yes.
What did you discuss with him on that, other than the emoticon? And I imagine you didn't lead with that as your intro topic. Hey, James, what does this mean? It didn't start like that? Is that true?
True.
Okay. Tell us how this session went.
Well, first I asked him how he was doing, and he said good.
Is that a change?
I don't think he meant good like he was doing so much better. I think it was just sort of a rote answer.
Just a customary
So,
response?
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
Tell us what happened.
And then that's when we talked about the emoticon.
Let me ask you this. Did he talk with you about his ex-girlfriend at that time?
Yes.
What did he tell you about his ex-girlfriend?
He said that and I'm looking at my notes now. He said his ex-girlfriend texted him again, quote, "She's going through the 5 stages of grief. She's in depression now." And that he also texted, that he texted to her, "The thorn in my side was well worth the rose. And I don't see the glass, I see beyond the glass."
He told you those were the text communications between him and his ex-girlfriend? And
Yes.
he's telling you this on May 1st?
Yes.
Does he tell you about other relationships that he's pursuing?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
He said that now he was with another girl.
Hang on one sec. Are those his words? I'm with another girl?
Yes.
Okay, go on.
And that it's dangerous because she is in his neuroscience class and there were only 6 of them.
What did you explore with him what dangerous meant?
No, I thought he was just referring to the fact it was such a small program.
Okay. Does he talk to you about, or do you ask him about past girlfriends and relationships that he's had?
I did.
What does he tell you about girlfriends he's had in the past?
He said that he'd had multiple others that usually would last about 4 months and then he would just stop talking to them.
Did he talk to you at all about what was going on with him in school at that time?
He did.
What does he tell you?
He said that in the lab, his experiment was not working, so he was going to have to, quote, make up some bullshit.
What else? Does he tell you what's coming up for him in the future in terms of school?
Yes, he had some important exam, the prelims that were coming up in June.
In your notes, do you call them comps?
I do.
Is that
That's another set of important exams, but that's later on in the program. Really, I meant to say prelims.
Does he also tell you anything about how his lab rotation went before the one where he'd have to make some bullshit up?
He said that he was going to have to pick a lab to work with, and that the second lab that he had worked with had told him not to bother applying to that one, that they didn't think it was a good fit.
Now, despite all these things that you're talking to him about, does he ever express to you that he is depressed?
No,
Does he ever appear to you to be depressed?
no,
Does he ever say that he's suicidal?
no.
Did you have further conversations with him or attempt to about this earlier thought that he was thinking of harming or killing others?
Yes.
What does he tell you?
I don't remember the exact words, but again, not much.
Is he giving up information about this?
No,
Does he tell you about any plans,
no,
any targets?
no,
Does he ever tell you about the phrase human capital on May 1st?
no,
Does he tell you that he has thoughts that if he kills people, it will make him feel better or it will increase his self-worth?
no.
At this point, how would you describe the relationship, the therapeutic relationship you think you have with the defendant?
Again, tentative.
Do you want to take steps to address that tentative relationship?
Yes.
And so what do you tell the defendant you want to do?
So I asked him if it would be all right if we had a consultant, another psychiatrist, come in and meet with him and myself for a second opinion.
Who did you have in mind?
Dr. Robert Feinstein,
Why?
because he is a supervisor that I've worked with a lot, and I had discussed the case with him and thought he would add some helpful information.
Was it something to do with his gender as well?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So I was wondering if perhaps one of the reasons James didn't seem very comfortable talking to me was because I was a female, and I thought, well, maybe he'll do better with a man.
Did you bring this topic up in some detail with the defendant?
About the gender?
No, ma'am, I'm sorry. About wanting to bring in Dr. Feinstein.
Yes.
And how did he respond?
He agreed. Well, at first he said, oh, it'll be to lock me up.
And what did you say in response to that?
I said, no, it's just to give us some more information and help with the treatment.
Was he amenable to that?
Yes.
Does he agree to come back for another appointment?
Yes.
Now, you needed to coordinate your calendars, and I mean yours and the defendant's, along with Dr. Feinstein's?
Correct.
Now, did that happen right then and there on May 1st, or did you have to do it down the road?
We did it by email, mostly down the road.
Did you, because of the time it would take to coordinate those calendars, offer the defendant the opportunity to come in and see you again in between?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said, and there's an email exchange that's in this exhibit about that. He said, if you can just refill the prescription over the phone, then why do we need to meet?
Not an enthusiastic response.
No. So,
Objection. Speculation.
Overruled?
Ma'am, can you tell us on that May 1st and thereafter, before the May 31st appointment that you have with him and Dr. Feinstein, did you do anything with the medications at that time?
let me check.
Are you looking at People's 1248?
I am.
Okay.
I'm looking at the May 1st visit. No, we didn't change his medications at that point.
Did you have a conversation with him about how he's feeling in terms of the meds?
Yes.
Now, does he tell you anything like, I'm feeling manic, I'm feeling mania, anything like that?
No.
Now, what dosage of sertraline has he been on at this point?
So at this point, he's on 150 milligrams.
And it's just my own calendar skills, but it looks like it's been 5 weeks or so. Is that fair?
That sounds about right.
Okay, and still no expressions of anything like that?
No.
You know what? I left out something. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
And this perhaps preceded your conversation with him about Dr. Feinstein. But does the defendant make statements to you about observations he's made of you crinkling your nose, that kind of thing at this session?
He does.
Tell us about that.
He said regarding me, and I'm going to read from my notes here.
Okay.
You do certain things, like crinkle your nose, which means dislike. And then regarding the mistake that I made on the prescription, he said, you have an unconscious, and that makes you do things.
Now, when we talked before, during that same session, about you asking him about his homicidal thoughts, does he give you an answer discussing something utilitarian at the top of that page, ma'am?
He does.
Tell us what he said when you asked him about any thoughts that he had.
He said, and this is a quote, and I'm reading this again from the notes, you see it in a utilitarian way. I didn't know what he meant, so I said, well, what do you mean? Can you say more? And then he said, quote, you'd want to eliminate that. You'd have to see it that way.
Wanting to eliminate those thoughts.
I didn't know what he meant.
Did he ever give any indication to you on May the 1st that he had taken any additional steps to find a target or a plan or move forward at all on these long-standing thoughts?
No.
You had indicated that there was emails back and forth scheduling this. Are those also contained in 1248?
Yes,
Okay. Does he come back on Thursday, May 31st,
he does.
along with Dr. Feinstein?
Yes,
And is the defendant on time?
yes,
Dressed the same as he always is?
yes,
Presentation and affect the same as it always was?
more or less,
Okay. Where did you have the meeting? Same place you'd always had it?
in my office.
Did you and Dr. Feinstein have a discussion or make a decision about who would lead this particular session?
We did,
And?
And we decided that it made sense for Dr. Feinstein to do the interview. We wanted to see if he would do better with a male, a different person, and see how he did.
And so what did your role become?
So I was more of an observer. I was in the room.
Were you taking notes and such too?
No, just after the session.
Okay. During that session, does the defendant, what does the defendant tell Dr. Feinstein?
Well, a number of things. Looking at my notes, one of the first things he said was, I think Dr. Feinstein was asking him about if he understood what other people thought about him, and then talking about his ex-girlfriend, he did tell her that he hates people after they broke up.
He said after they broke up, he told his girlfriend he hates people.
He hates people, yes.
Also describe something else that he hates in that session.
He did.
What did he say?
He said he hates sheeple and shepherds.
Sheeple, like a combination between sheep and people?
Objection, speculation, leading.
Sustain as is speculation. You can ask how she understood it if you want, but it's, the objection is sustained.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Did you know what he meant by that?
No,
Okay. Did he give any more indication what he meant by that?
no.
What else did he and Dr. Feinstein talk about with you there?
Well, Dr. Feinstein asked him about his parents and his relationship with them. And he said that his mother was, quote, overly altruistic. He said that he did have some contact with her. For instance, he had called her on Mother's Day. And then regarding his father, he said he was a statistician, that he wasn't an affectionate person, but he would tell him how he felt. And then regarding his sister, he just said sibling rivalry.
Now, does he talk to Dr. Feinstein about what he's doing leading up to his prelims or those comps that you described?
Yes, he said he was not studying for the exam.
And did Dr. Feinstein express any concern about that or ask him more about that?
He asked him more about it.
Did the defendant tell him anything about, I'm prepared enough, I know what I'm doing, things to that effect?
I don't remember the exact word, but something to the effect of that he wasn't worried that he hadn't really studied anything yet.
Did he say what else he was doing during that time?
He said he was playing a game called Diablo, and that he'd played about 100 hours in the past couple weeks.
And to be precise, is that Diablo 3?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Did he talk, did Dr. Feinstein at all ask him what else he was doing, books he was reading, things he was?
He did.
And what did the defendant tell him?
And the defendant told him, I'm going to read from my notes again, that he has read Nietzsche, Kaczynski, and the Tylenol Terrorist.
Did he expand on that in response to any other questions by Dr. Feinstein, why he was doing that or what that meant?
No.
Did Dr. Feinstein explore with him any homicidal thoughts that he had?
He did.
What did the defendant tell him?
I don't remember the exact words, but basically it was more of the general thought. And again, no, just denying having any specific target or plan.
Did he say whether or not he was feeling depressed?
No.
Did he appear to you to be depressed?
No.
Did he say anything about being suicidal?
No.
Did Dr. Feinstein discuss with him the possibility of an antipsychotic again?
Yes.
And what did the defendant tell him?
He wasn't interested at that point.
And was it just that quick? We would like to do this? No? Or how'd it go down?
I don't remember exactly.
But he was not having any of it.
No.
Does he agree to come back for another session?
He does.
Good sign.
Yes.
And he agrees to come back and meet with you and Dr. Feinstein?
Yes.
Let me ask you, when he's walking out, by the time he walks out of your office on May 31st, has he told you any new information about his homicidal thoughts than he gave you way back when?
No.
Did he tell you that he'd purchased 2 tear gas canisters at that time?
No.
Did he tell you that he'd purchased a gas mask and a filter?
No.
Did he tell you that he had purchased or attempted to purchase any weapons?
No.
What was the next appointment that you scheduled with the defendant?
June 11th.
And that's one that worked on everyone's schedule, on everyone's calendar?
Yes.
Okay. And in the interim, between that time, May 31st and June 11th, did the defendant make any contact with you?
No.
Are you aware of any contact he made with Dr. Feinstein?
No.
Not to talk about drugs or anything like that?
No.
And I should ask you, on May 31st, did the defendant express to you any signs of mania or feeling manic?
No.
Did he describe to you any concerns or problems he was having with medication?
No.
June 11th, does the defendant appear on June the 11th?
He does.
And is he dressed as he always is?
Yes.
Same affect, same presentation,
Yes.
same way of talking, that kind of stuff?
Right.
And does he come back to your office?
Yes.
And is Dr. Feinstein there?
Yes.
Is this scheduled to be a full session?
Yes, 45, 50 minutes.
It doesn't last that long?
No,
How long does it last?
about 20 minutes.
Tell us what happens when he comes in on June the 11th.
So he came in, and as he and I were walking into the room where Dr. Feinstein was seated, I asked him how his exams went, and he said that he had failed.
Okay, did you explore, or did Dr. Feinstein explore what that meant?
Yes, I had, because I've treated many graduate students and have seen some who've had difficulties with that test, I said, something to the effect of, I'm sorry to hear that. I know it's possible to retake it or sometimes do some remedial work.
And was he responsive to that?
He replied that he thought he would not retake the test and that he would drop out of the neurosciences program.
He seemed depressed at all by this?
No, he seemed relaxed.
Now, the words you used in your report were inappropriately nonchalant. What
Yes.
did you mean by that?
I meant that most students, if they failed an important exam like this, would be upset in some way, and he seemed very relaxed. To me, that seemed inappropriate.
Less stressed
Less than,
he had been before? And I say that because you use the word relieved.
well, I guess specifically when we were asking him more about exiting the program, he did have a sort of an air of relief about him when he was talking about that.
Okay, and then what did Dr. Feinstein explore with him after that part of the conversation?
So at this point, it was sort of a combination of Dr. Feinstein and me asking questions, and we were looking for any stressors that might elevate his risk of dangerousness. So we asked him, first of all, if he had a plan. And he said, well, yes, he knew he had to meet with his advisor to exit. There was going to be some paperwork. And when we asked about, how will you support yourself, he said, well, I think I'm going to look for a job.
Okay, why is that? How does that impact you? And let me back up. Do you know what the VASA tool is, the Violence and Suicidality Assessment tool is?
I do.
And is that what you're talking about going into here?
That plus even more information beyond that.
The answers that he's giving you about having a plan and these short-term goals, how does that impact you as you begin to assess what's going on with him?
Well, we're feeling better, I guess, about the situation, that he had these logical plans.
What else does he tell you?
So he said that we asked him, well, will you go back to California where your family is? He said, no, I have a lease that goes through November, and I probably won't break that.
Those are his words, I probably won't break the lease.
Yes.
Is that reassuring in some way also?
Yes, it seemed logical and following the society's rules, I guess.
Go on.
So then we also were wondering, well, sometimes people are very embarrassed about something like this. So we asked if he told anybody, and he said, well, yes, he had told one of his classmates that he failed because she asked him. And then specifically about his parents, that he was planning to tell his parents. So we asked a little more about that, and he said, well, he didn't think they would be surprised that he had given them some hints, at least a month, maybe some months before, that he was thinking he might drop out of the program anyway.
Thought they'd be supportive?
Yes, yes.
Did he tell you whether he liked the program or not?
Let me look at my notes here.
That helps, yeah, 1248. Is that right, ma'am, the notes you're looking at?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't see anything, and I'm not remembering that he specifically said whether he liked it or not, but to that point, we wondered if he might be mad at the program, and so we asked about that, and he did not seem mad at the program in general, the school, or any specific individual associated with it.
What else did you get from him by way of information? Did he indicate to you what he would do for employment?
Well, he said he would look for a job. He didn't say what type.
Okay. Did you ask him about any financial stressors that he had?
We did. He said actually he had about $10,000 in savings, and that if he really needed money, he thought his parents might help him out.
Now, again, how does this affect you as you begin to analyze where this could be going?
Well, it was all sounding like he was functioning well and looking ahead to the future and had very reasonable plans of how to get by and what he was going to do after he left the program.
Did he express any thoughts of hurting himself?
No.
Did he appear to you to be depressed?
No.
Did he express depression?
No.
Did he appear to you or express to you anything about mania or being manic?
No.
Did he express to you any other concerns about the medications that he'd been on now this long time?
No.
Mr. Brockler,
Sir?
I don't mean to rush you, but if you have more than just a few minutes, my preference would be to break now because Mr. Yannick, I'm sure, needs a break and everyone else needs a break. We've been going at it for about 2 hours, so
Yes, Your Honor.
is that okay if we break now?
Yes, sir.
All right. Members of the jury, let's go ahead and take our lunch break. Please remember that my advisements apply during the lunch break. Let's take an hour and a half. I'll see you back here a little bit before 1:30, okay? Have a good lunch, folks.
Thank you.
The record should reflect that the jury has exited the courtroom. Everyone may be seated, and Dr. Fenton, you may go on break as well. Thank you. Is there anything we need to talk about on behalf of the prosecution, Mr. Brockler?
No, Your Honor.
Anything on behalf of the defense, Ms. Brady? All right, I'll see you after lunch. The court will be in recess. Thank you.